Hello, my name is Zachariah with Old Man Gaming, and welcome to another Snap Judgment review. What is a Snap Judgment review if you've never listened before? Well, I think game reviewers nowadays get a little bit too caught up in 100%ing or at least getting near complete on any game they play, and they kind of forget what it's like to play it right in the beginning. So I do about 5 to 10 hours with the game, and I'm just trying to give you an idea whether you're going to enjoy it right away or not. That, coupled with the fact that I think games are one of the most subjective forms of art, I won't be giving a score to this review. Instead, I will be telling you what the overview of the game is, what the overall of the game is. Then I will be giving you a list of pros and cons that are my opinion, just like all reviews are. And then I'll be telling you whether I will be sticking with this game or DLC outside the purposes of this video. So with all that said, what am I reviewing today? I am reviewing Ara History Untold. This is Microsoft's kind of answer to Civilization, their new 4X historical-based strategy game, the grand strategy, if you will. So, on its surface, this is very much a Civilization-type game. Right off the bat, you are prompted to choose a ruler. There are a lot of rulers in here, 30 rulers. I'm not exactly sure what Civ 6 and 5 had, but it feels like it's more than most of those. In any case, what you then do is once you pick a ruler, which is much more an overview of the culture that you're selecting to start with, kind of their strengths and their weaknesses. It gives you some passive buffs and debuffs and stuff like that. You get a procedurally generated map, a certain number of other rulers, usually quite a few, and then you do the normal 4X thing. You explore, you collect resources, you collect ground, you spread your culture, and you end up going to war with others. In this kind of game of diplomacy versus war versus technological advancement as you climb through the years and ages of your culture from, Cro-Magnon sort of era all the way up until future territories that we haven't even seen before. However, this overview is where the similarities between it and Civilization completely change. End. Once in the game, Ara does a lot of things very almost methodically different than Civilization. First of all, in Civilization and a lot of other 4X games, there's multiple methods of victory, such as using Civilization as an example. You have a cultural victory, where you gain the most cultural kind of like things that you have built so that your civilization is remembered through the eras. You can do a military victory where you just destroy everybody else. You could do a technological victory where you're the first to kind of orbit space. And there's all these weird different kind of like victory kind of ways to do it. Even the same with my personal favorite, Age of Wonders 4, there's multiple different victory points. Ara does away with that. You have prestige. Everything you do gives you prestige. It gives you this point scored basis that just compares you to other cultures around the world. So earn culture, like create cultural monuments, you gain prestige. Win wars, you gain prestige. Advance to technologies before others, you guessed it, you gain prestige, slowly climbing the ranks between you and all the other rulers that are on the world. As with Civilization, you'll slowly move through technological eras. With this one, you have to learn a certain number of technologies before you can unlock the next age of technology, the Bronze Age, and then the Medieval Age, and blah, blah, blah. And if you don't go through, you kind of have to weigh whether you leave those other technologies behind in the previous one and move to the new era, or you learn them all and get there last. Now, here becomes the trick. One of the tricks. One of the other tricks that are very different than Civilization. Civilization, unless you destroy a culture, it's on the map until the very end of the game. With Ara, it takes place in 3 different acts. Those acts are divided up into the 10 eras that can potentially happen. So every game will happen through these 10 eras. When a certain number of players reaches a certain era threshold. So right off the bat, first act, I believe is 4. The fourth age. When 4 characters get to the 4th age, Act 1 ends, moves to Act 2. things get tricky at this point because there is a ranking system. And that ranks your prestige. The top 8 players move on to the next rank. Well, I think it's the top 10 players move on to the next rank with kind of a division about how good you're doing. And then the forgettable species, the forgettable cultures, they get erased from history, removed from the map, completely destroyed. As you move through, this continues to happen over the course of the next act, all the way in the third act where everything wraps up and finishes. Another big difference here between this and Civilization is that turns happen simultaneously. So you're not actually watching things play out in front of you. Instead, you're declaring what you want all your things to do. Whether it's building something, constructing something, moving a military unit, or attacking another military unit, you basically declare what you're doing. Every other player is doing the same thing at the same time. When all of the people have finalized their selections, everything moves forward at the same time. An interesting mechanism, and very different from Civilization. Another different thing from Civilization, and again, I do want a disclaimer one final time now that I'm deep into this, and I'm using Civilization as kind of as an example. I did not play 5, 6, or 7 Civilization. I am kind of a 4X guy, but I had the last... That's not true. I played 5. That was the last Civilization I played. I haven't gotten into Civilization since then. There's a lot of things about Civilization that I actually think are kind of antiquated. I know that is going to be kind of like murder on people's ears. My 4X of choice is 100% Age of Wonders 4. I absolutely worship that game. So that should be the one that I'm using as an example, but everybody's going to be comparing this to Civilization anyway, so I feel like that's where it needs to go. And I know enough about Civilization because I'm in the space to know kind of the differences. But I might get a couple of them wrong. So, I do not believe that city building in Civilization is this way. If it is, obviously take me to task. It's not that way in Age of Wonders 4. I prefer it not to be this way, but basically what it is as your city grows, your everything is built on the tile. So it's not necessarily like, I'm adding a monastery to just my core city, and then there'll be a special Providence improvement at some point later. With this, everything you build is on those tiles. And then it gets even more complicated because each one of those little buildings also has supplies that you can supply them with, which will give them weird different buffs. It has specialists that you can employ there, which also give them buffs, and it also has equipment, which give them buffs. On top of that, your entire city as a whole has amenities that give them buffs as well. And that's really Aura in a nutshell, boiled down. Move through the eras, get a victory. So, I want to go into the pros and cons. Before I do, I need to make something very clear. There have been a lot of reviews about this game talking about a lot of bugs, glitches, game crashes, that sort of thing, what have you. In my 6-7 hours of the game, I did not experience any bugs, glitches, crashes, anything like that. I am not running on a high-end computer. I did have it on SSD, but my graphics card is relatively old as far as as it stands right now. But I was still running on high graphics all the way around. And it is a very pretty game. But I didn't experience any of these issues. However, I, again, only played it for about 6 to 7 hours. So you'll have to take those other people's word for that. I am sure they're in there, and I just got lucky enough to not experience them. But because I didn't experience them, they are not on the cons list. So with that out of the way, I like to go positive first. Let's talk about the positives of Aura History Untold. One thing that I really liked about Aura History Untold is the fact that it does push the boundaries on some things. It does change it up, and it does try to be different. The biggest thing I really liked is the prestige system, actually. I know that's weird, right? To go from like 4 or 5 different ways to win to one, it almost feels like you're limiting your options. But I actually felt like it was freeing, because now I can really play my city any way I want as long as I'm earning that prestige, and everything earns me prestige. So if I'm shooting to be a cultural phenomenon, I'm getting prestige. If I'm trying to be a trading diplomat, I'm getting prestige. And that's something that I really enjoy. It's one thing that even my game kind of lacks, my Age of Wonders 4. The win conditions are hard, borderline kind of silly at times. Like, one of them, the magic victory, and anybody who's played that game knows what I mean, is like borderline impossible to get. And why would you be trying to get it? Why is that the definitive? The other thing, why is that the definitive way that your culture wins? That's the other thing, is like, why is me going to space first the way that I win this? Like, it doesn't make sense. Whereas prestige and just an overall tournament is good. I always turn scored victories off in Age of Wonders 4, but if there's only scored victories, that would be an interesting way to go. So, I think that I actually kind of like this prestige system. I liked it. I think there's some tweaking that needs to happen, but overall I felt like it was a pro. My next pro is something called a Golden Age, and I don't think that this is in Civilization, but I don't know enough about Civilization to know. I just know that I haven't experienced this particular mechanic in any other 4X game I've played. The Golden Age is like a counter that you have, and if you're doing certain things with your population, like making them super happy, making them feel secure, whatever, you hit what's called like a Golden Age, like the Golden Age of that society. And then basically for 10 turns, all of your prestige amounts are doubled. Makes for some really interesting build options. I also think it's kind of a cool, like, oh man, I've got my society to that Golden Age, like everybody wants to beat me. I think that it's a really cool feeling to get, and it's a really cool mechanism in there that kind of throws kind of like a cool twist on the prestige system as a whole. My next big one is the custom religion. So what I really like about this is you can customize your religion. You can actually name it. I actually feel like there could be some more like options to it, like actually like what the people do with it or whatever, because basically what ends up happening is all religion in Aura is basically the same as far as how it works mechanism wise. Like the units that you get for religion to convert other people's city to your religion, the mechanisms are all the same, regardless of what religion you're studying. That being said, you also get these things called verses. So as your religion spreads, you get to kind of twist your religion to give you buffs on certain other things. If your religion is more military, maybe you'll take a verse in the military that drives you to do holy wars. If it's a more cultural religion, maybe you'll get something that helps with cultural improvement or masterpiece creation from your paragons. It's a really cool system. I think that they could do more with it, but I'm putting it on the pros column anyway, because I think it was really cool to create. I think I called it something like blood religion or something like that, and like came up with a whole thing in my head, and then you can get to pick the building that studies it and whatnot. I thought it was really cool part of this. So not everything about the fighting did I like, which we will definitely talk about in the cons, but I want to point out a couple of interesting key elements of it that I'm pretty sure is very different from Civilization and very, very different from Age of Wonders 4. When you build a unit, right? So like when you're building an army, you have a limited overall army kind of thing for whatever your culture is. But once you've paid to build an army, you then have to muster the forces. So you've trained the people, then you have to organize them. What this does is it creates like 2 or 3 extra turns that you don't have a unit there. And you can still speed up building, just like with all things, if you pour money at it, if you throw money at it. But with this, you can't speed up mustering. So no matter how fast you want to make a troops, you're still limited to that 2 or 3 turn limit. What's interesting about this is armies drain funds, right? So like you can get rid of them, like disband them, to get those funds back each round. But you have to weigh that against keeping your military there, because you can't just pop out a bunch of troops when you need them. And honestly, my game, Age of Wonders 4, that I absolutely love, is a perpetrator of this. Like, if I run out of units, I know all of those units that died are not refunding money, but that drain on my economy has come back, so I can just start popping out units again. and build up a military super fast. With this, you really have to think about how you use your military, because losing a unit in a battle, especially in the early goings when you're only allowed 2 units, kind of makes a world of difference. Early in one of the fights, I lost a unit. I was just harassing through my opponent with 2 units. I got too overzealous. Those units died, and he only had 1 unit left, but I couldn't muster my troops fast enough. He came all the way in and took a city. So, like, that kind of strategy is next level, and I really enjoyed that part of it. There's a lot of problems with the military system and the troop-based system. Just this specific section, I really enjoyed. Finally, I got to give a shout-out to the beauty of this game. It's very pretty. Very pretty. Like I said, I'm not using the most badass PC out there, and it's still really pretty. What's even cooler about its kind of beautifulness, or whatever you say, is that you have that fishbowl aspect too. When I play Age of Wonder 4 and I build something, you don't see stuff constantly moving down there. With this, you can actually zoom in on your city and see everybody going about their day-to-day lives. Like, every part of your civilization is represented just watching the city. So you have this kind of weird, almost SimCity vibe to it too, which I really enjoyed about that. There was definitely, like, some moments where, like, I would just zoom in, watch my people walk around and move them. Not enough moments, which we'll talk about in the cons, but it was really cool. The fishbowl aspect is really cool, as well as that kind of, like, that kind of the attention to detail in this game is really great. But let's get into the negatives. Let's get into the cons. First of all, I wrote down 4 or 5 different things for this, but I'm just going to tie it all up into one. The tutorial, the UI, the operating system for this is atrocious. It is terrible. The tutorial tells you parts of the things that are very important, leaves out other things. It's hard to figure out where to build units. It's very hard to manage your city. It gets even harder as your city grows, because every building can have 4 different supplies, 2 different amenities, and a specialist attached to it. It becomes a micromanagement nightmare so quickly. It is bothersome. Again, it is very hard to figure out where stuff is. Plus, there's a lot of redundancies on top of that. So, like, you have all these places where, like, you can't even figure out how to do something, but then you have 2 different buttons literally right next to each other to muster troops. Why? Why do I have 2 of the exact same button? And you can't figure out how to do the buttons over here. It's terrible. It is an absolute mess. I don't know how they fix this, but it was really a struggle for me to figure out how to do this. And I'm not new to this. Like, I'm not new to this genre. Granted, it's not probably the thing that I most advertise that I'm an expert at, but I have a lot of fun with these games, and I play them quite a bit. And I was lost. The UI is just fucking terrible. And please do something about that. I'm sorry for the swear words, but it was the most frustrating part of this game, without a doubt. Alright, so the next thing. So, as part of the battle system, the other interesting part of the battle system that I almost put on here as a pro is that the battles take place over turns. They don't actually just happen. In Civilization, if you move a unit against another unit, the battle immediately resolves. Same with, Age of Wonders 4, it goes into like a CRPG tactical strategy thing, or you can autoplay it, but the battle resolves right then. With this, when they engage, they are in battle. You can then watch the battle play out, you can see the stats, and see how they're doing each turn. You know what would be really cool to add to this? And almost seems like the reason to do something like this, so that you can make tactical retreats with your unit. Pull them out of the fight. Maybe change something about the fight. No, my friends, and that is why this is on a con. If your unit engages with another person's unit, they are engaged, and you just get to watch them die for 3 straight turns. What is the point of this? Why not just have the battle resolve in 1 round? Why are you wasting my time torturing me by pointing out my mistake? Or, hell, wasting my time by having me absolutely pummel the other group in a submission. There is no surrender option. There is no retreat option. There is no option to change your tactics. There is nothing. It is just, they are locked in this mortal battle for 3 rounds. And I hate to tell you, that's just not how wars are fought. Usually, when one side starts to lose, they run away. That's how it works. It's called a tactical retreat. It's used commonly on battlefields everywhere. You can't do that with this. It is mutually assured destruction or nothing. And I found this extremely frustrating. Why build in why build in that the fight goes over multiple rounds if you can't do anything during it? I think you have this game, right? And like personally, I like it much better when it's a tactical strategy fight like Age of Wonders 4, where I can go in and actually do the battle myself. But that's not necessarily a staple of the genre. You know, it's much more units versus each other. So now you've built in this system that gives you an option to kind of bring that to the next level and actually make some changes in the battlefield, do some things, use some strategy in that fight to maybe change the outcome. And they don't build anything in. It's just like a torture of just watching your numbers go down. And it never switches either. I just want to point that out. If it starts winning, they're going to win. What are we doing here at that point? It was one of the most infuriating parts of this game, is that you'd get locked up in a battle, and whoever was winning it first would win, but it would take them 3 turns, and you just have to watch it happen, and you couldn't do anything about it. And that was just, I don't understand why this is here like this. Just have the battle resolve, period. I mean, even if you want to say they're tied up for 3 rounds, fine. Just be like, okay, because it's a battle, they are tied up for 3 rounds, they are victorious. Boom. Why are we waiting for 3 rounds to watch them slowly die? It's mind-numbing. Okay, we're getting into the last ones. My next one is the event variation. They have an event system in this, kind of like Age of Wonders 4's events. Age of Wonders 4, however, has a wide variation of events, many of them taking place depending on your alignment, which means you may or may not get them on any one playthrough. This one, not so much. And I even tested this. After about 3 hours with my first game, I started another game specifically to see if all the events would be the same. And guess what, ladies and gentlemen? They are. You get an event every time you meet a nomadic tribe, or like an independent tribe. You get an event, cool, and those are like, there's like 11 of them, and that's what you're gonna get. And then as far as your own civilization, you're gonna get the same things there too. It is a lot of repeat. I would like to see a lot more event variation here, so I've got to put this on a con. I like seeing events, but immediately I can tell that the replay value is a little bit lower, because if I'm going in with, my French culture, then I'm going in with my French culture and getting the same events as I'm getting with Shaka Zulu and everybody else. It's just like, why bother? And then finally, not finally, there's two more. One of the other ones is, I'll save the biggest one for last. I don't understand why these games feel the need to do this, but I hate the whole picking the leaders thing. Why are we doing that? Why do I have to play Mao Yin or whatever to get the culture that I want, or Bismarck? Why can't it just be the German culture and then go from there? I don't understand why we have to attach these weird rulers to it, and then when they're doing diplomacy, you see them flopping around. I'd much rather just make a character like Age of Wonders 4, or even just have it be kind of God mode, where like Humankind did it, where you're just building a culture. I'd much rather something like this than these weird token leaders that cartoonizes war criminals, and on the other side too, people who should be revered are turned into little Looney Tunes characters that talk to each other. Leave the leaders out of it and let us just build on the culture. Now finally, one of my biggest complaints, and unfortunately this is so ingrained in the game, it cannot be something that changed. Everything else could get better, which will lead to whether or not I'm sticking with it, but this is not going to get better. And I appreciate that they tried something new, and And I appreciate that they took a shot at something new. But the fact that everybody goes at the same time sounds cool, but it ends up turning out not so cool because you don't really see what's happening. It makes everything anticlimactic. Not only does it make everything anticlimactic, and like it's much more like a choice thing instead of you're running a civilization. It's like you're giving orders and hoping everything pays out, and it just gives you so much less sense of accomplishment than having a battle or watching a battle happen. The other thing is, you have this really cool game that's really pretty to the point where you've put so many details in for like this fishbowl effect where you could watch the city. You know, in Age of Wonders 4, it always sucks when I gotta wait, you know, especially late game when I gotta wait like 2 full minutes for all the computer players to go through. But if I had this kind of pretty fishbowl thing, I would just zoom in on the city and watch it for a little while. You have this thing and you never give them any time to vamp on it. Like, you never give them any time to just admire their city. Because of this, you're just constantly go, 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 and it all feels like, I don't know, like a trading card game. Which I like trading card games. This isn't what I play this for. So I don't know. The same time turn thing just doesn't really work for me in the way that like I feel like they were trying to make it. So finally, I know this has gone long, but I don't like to do negative reviews, so I like to be very thorough on the negative reviews to explain why it's not my cup of tea, but I will not be sticking with this outside of this. I've already kind of removed it from my game. At the end of the day, I hate to say this, but playing this game just made me want to play Age of Wonders 4. And I know Age of Wonders 4 is fantasy and not historical, but like, if Age of Wonders 4 was historical, like system-wise, I would rather play that than this. And that, I think, in lies the problem. There's just too much micromanagement. There's also way too much skipping of turns. Like, you get to a point where you can't do anything, and all you can do is just go through a turn, go through a turn, go through a turn, go through a turn, go through a turn. It just gets very frustrating and tedious and micromanagey. The AI is kind of insane when it comes to diplomacy, and I still don't quite understand the trade system, to be quite honest with you guys. The UI is a nightmare. It's just, there's not enough here for me to overcome the negatives. So, did I get it right? Did I get it wrong? You guys can comment in the comments below. Let me know what you think. And, yeah. You can also reach us on Facebook at OldManGamingDH, on X at OldManGaming9. You can join our Discord, links in the description below. Influence this and all of our shows from there. And as long as you guys keep watching and listening, we'll keep making them.